Welcome, friends. Come on in and make yourself comfortable for a while. Whether you're curled beneath a familiar blanket, resting your head against a cool pillow, or simply sitting quietly as the evening settles around you, I am glad you are here. Perhaps the room is already dim, with only a small pool of soft light beside the bed. Perhaps the sounds of the day have faded, leaving only the low hush that belongs to late hours, when doors are closed, voices grow quieter, and even the busiest streets seem to loosen their grip on time. There is nowhere you need to hurry tonight. The past will wait for us. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these journeys into the past, and let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. There is something pleasant in imagining people settling down in different places under different skies, all listening to the same quiet story. Tonight, we are stepping back into a world of polished silver, heavy curtains, carved staircases, enormous dining rooms, and families whose names appeared regularly in newspapers. It is not the world of medieval castles and monastery bells, although in certain ways the great mansions of America's Gilded Age possess something of the same enclosed rhythm. They had their own hierarchies, their own rituals, their own servants moving through hidden passages, and their own carefully guarded boundaries between those who lived upstairs and those who worked below. At the centre of this world is a young heiress. She is born into wealth so large that she may never fully understand what ordinary scarcity feels like. Her family fortune may have come from railroads, steel, banking, shipping, mining, dry goods, or one of the vast industrial enterprises that reshaped the United States during the final decades of the 19th century. By the time she is old enough to notice money at all, it has already become part of the architecture around her. The house itself teaches the first lesson. A Gilded Age mansion is rarely just a home. It is a statement. Its entrance hall may rise 2 or 3 stories, with marble underfoot, carved oak along the walls, and a staircase broad enough to make every descent feel ceremonial. Heavy doors divide public rooms from private ones. Drawing rooms wait beneath chandeliers, portraits of ancestors, or sometimes ancestors acquired more recently through artistic imagination than genealogy, watch silently from gilded frames. The young heiress learns early that some doors are for family, some for guests, and some for servants. Behind the polished rooms lies another house entirely. Service corridors twist behind dining rooms. Narrow staircases allow maids and footmen to move almost invisibly between floors. Bells or electric call systems summon servants from distant parts of the building. Coal fires must be tended, lamps must be cleaned, water must be carried where plumbing is incomplete or unreliable. Linen must be washed, pressed, folded, and counted. Silver requires constant polishing, and even a quiet breakfast may depend upon hours of unseen preparation. In this respect, the mansion resembles much older great households. Medieval manor houses had depended upon cooks, laundresses, stable hands, clerks, chamber servants, and stewards. Their floors might have been covered with rushes, their halls lit with beeswax candles, their meals served on wooden trenchers. The Gilded Age mansion replaces rushes with carpets and trenchers with porcelain, but the underlying principle remains familiar. Luxury is created through labour that powerful families are trained not to notice too closely. No one can quite agree how much wealthy children understood about this machinery of service. Some memoirs suggest genuine affection between children and nurses or maids. Others reveal how firmly social distance was maintained. A servant might know an heiress's fears, illnesses, moods, and habits more intimately than many relatives, yet still be expected to enter quietly, speak carefully, and withdraw when no longer needed. The heiress's earliest world is therefore full of people who are close to her without ever being her equals. A nurse may wake her in the morning, a maid prepares clothing, a governess oversees lessons, a footman appears at a doorway carrying a tray, a coachman waits outside when she's taken into the city. Somewhere below stairs, cooks begin work long before the family rises. Breakfast smells drift upward: coffee, toast, eggs, perhaps hot rolls, while farther away coal smoke settles over rooftops. The sounds of the household also mark time. Not monastery bells, as they once might have done in an older century, but clocks, servant bells, carriage wheels, footsteps crossing polished floors, and doors opening at appointed hours. Even immense wealth does not free the household from routine. In fact, it often creates more of it. Children of great families are expected to appear at particular times, dressed appropriately, behaving in ways that reflect well upon the family name. Spontaneity is permitted only within boundaries. An heiress may possess a nursery full of toys imported from Europe, dolls dressed in miniature fashions, illustrated books, carved animals, music boxes, and perhaps a rocking horse standing near the fireplace. Yet she may spend more time with hired caregivers than with her parents. Victorian and Gilded Age parenting customs among the wealthy often encourage a certain emotional distance, especially in formal households. Parents may visit the nursery rather than inhabit it. A mother might appear after breakfast, asking after lessons or health. A father may be seen at dinner in a library or before leaving for business. Their affection can be genuine, but it is filtered through schedules, servants, travel, social obligations, and the conviction that children must be shaped into suitable adults. There are also quieter beliefs surrounding childhood. Illness is feared constantly. Drafts are blamed for colds. Fresh air is praised but carefully managed. Children may be given tonics containing ingredients that modern medicine would regard with suspicion. Some families believe strongly in cod liver oil, mustard plasters, patent medicines, or carefully prescribed sea air. Remedies circulate through households much as herbal cures once moved through medieval villages. Those who recorded these domestic practices never fully agreed about which remedies genuinely helped. Many probably offered little more than comfort, ritual, and the reassuring feeling that something was being done. Outside, evening begins to gather around the mansion. Carriages pass beneath bare winter branches. Gas lamps or early electric lights glow through mist. Inside, fires settle behind iron grates, curtains are drawn against the dark, and servants move softly through corridors preparing rooms for the night. The young heiress grows within this carefully constructed world, surrounded by abundance and restriction in almost equal measure. Long before she understands courtship, inheritance, marriage settlements, or society columns, she is already learning the central lesson of her life. Wealth brings extraordinary possibilities, but it also brings an audience. Every gesture can reflect upon the family. Every friendship can matter. Every mistake may be remembered. And as the mansion grows quiet beneath the late evening sky, the girl at its centre is already being prepared, almost without realizing it, for the public life waiting beyond those heavy doors. By the time the heiress is old enough to leave the nursery for longer stretches of the day, her life becomes more deliberately arranged. Childhood does not disappear all at once, but it is slowly reorganized into lessons, manners, habits, and expectations. The rooms around her remain warm and richly furnished, yet the atmosphere changes. Toys give way to books, games are fitted around schedules. The governess becomes one of the most important figures in her daily world. For a daughter of a wealthy Gilded Age family, education is rarely intended simply to prepare her for employment. Her future is imagined differently. She's expected to become cultivated, graceful, socially capable, and sufficiently informed to move comfortably among powerful families. She may never need to earn a wage, but she will be expected to represent a fortune. That distinction shapes nearly everything she studies. Morning lessons often begin after breakfast, when the household has settled into its daytime rhythm. Somewhere below stairs, dishes are being cleared and silver returned to cupboards. Upstairs, the heiress sits at a writing desk beside a governess who may have been hired from England, France, Germany, or another respectable household in the United States. French is especially valuable. Among elite families, the ability to speak French carries associations with refinement, travel, literature, diplomacy, and European culture. A young woman who expects to spend part of her life in Paris, London, Rome, or at fashionable resorts cannot appear entirely helpless when confronted with another language. German may also be taught. Italian is sometimes added for families with artistic ambitions. The lessons are not always enjoyable. Vocabulary must be copied. Verbs must be memorized. Passages are translated repeatedly. Pronunciation is corrected until ordinary conversation begins to feel like another form of examination. There may be history, geography, arithmetic, literature, and religious instruction as well. Some heiresses receive surprisingly serious educations, particularly as the 19th century gives way to the 20th, and opportunities for women slowly expand. Others are given a narrower curriculum designed primarily to create an accomplished society woman. No one can quite agree on what constituted the ideal education for a wealthy daughter during these years. Some parents believed intellectual seriousness made a young woman more interesting and capable. Others worried that too much academic independence might encourage opinions considered inconvenient in polite society. So the safest accomplishments remain familiar ones. Music is important. A piano stands in many fashionable homes, not merely as decoration but as evidence of cultivation. The heiress practices scales, etudes, popular songs, and respectable classical pieces while a music teacher listens closely. Her posture matters almost as much as the notes. Hands should appear controlled. Movements should seem effortless. Singing may be added. Drawing and watercolour painting are useful accomplishments too. They can be practiced during long afternoons, shown to visitors, and carried into adulthood without threatening conventional expectations of femininity. Needlework has not vanished either. Although servants perform much of the practical sewing in a wealthy household, decorative embroidery remains respectable. It is an old habit surviving in a modern setting. Centuries earlier, noblewomen in manor houses and castles might have spent long hours stitching altar cloths, household textiles, or elaborate garments beside windows where daylight was precious. Now, in rooms warmed by radiators or coal fires, a Gilded Age daughter may work silk thread through fine fabric while listening to a governess read aloud. The materials have changed, but the quiet discipline of the hands remains. Religious instruction also occupies its place. A family may attend an Episcopal, Presbyterian, Catholic, or another prominent church, depending upon ancestry and location. Sunday observance can be formal. Clothing is carefully chosen. Carriages arrive at appointed hours. Children are expected to sit still through long services. The heiress learns prayers, biblical passages, hymns, and the moral language of her family. She also learns something less easily written into a textbook, the moral contradictions of wealth. She may be taught generosity while surrounded by servants whose incomes are tiny compared with her allowance. She may hear that humility is virtuous while living in a house deliberately designed to astonish guests. Charity is praised, but hierarchy is rarely questioned. Some young women notice these contradictions early. Others accept them as part of the natural order. Even now, historians continue to debate how deeply elite daughters understood the economic world supporting their comfort, because surviving diaries and letters reveal very different personalities. One girl might write anxiously about factory conditions or poverty. Another might devote pages to dresses, horses, guests, and travel without mentioning the workers whose labour made those pleasures possible. Much depends upon the household in which she is raised. Etiquette lessons begin almost invisibly. She's corrected when she interrupts. She's reminded how to enter a room, how to greet an older woman, how long to hold eye contact, how loudly to speak, and where to place her hands while seated. She learns that certain topics are inappropriate at the dinner table, that family disagreements should remain private, and that self-control is one of the most admired qualities in a young lady. Even laughter has boundaries. Too loud, and it may appear coarse, too restrained, and she risks seeming cold. Like the daughter of a medieval noble household centuries earlier, she's being trained not only to behave well, but to communicate rank through behaviour. Medieval girls of high birth might learn household management, religious devotion, embroidery, estate responsibilities, and the intricate customs of hospitality. Their world would be lit by beeswax candles and shaped by chapel bells, fur-lined cloaks, fasting days, and the arrival of travellers along muddy roads. The heiress inherits a different age, yet the expectation remains strangely familiar. A privileged daughter must embody the order of her household. Afternoons may bring dancing lessons. A teacher demonstrates the steps of the waltz, quadrille, or other dances considered necessary for formal society. The girl learns when to move, when to pause, how to accept a partner, and how to maintain composure while being watched. That final skill may matter most. She is always being observed. A governess observes her lessons, a maid observes her habits, parents observe her manners, visitors notice whether she is shy, lively, elegant, awkward, clever, or stubborn. The pressure is rarely spoken aloud, but it settles gently over the years. Outside the schoolroom windows, seasons turn. Winter snow softens the city streets, rain darkens carriage roads. In summer, the family may leave for a country house where lessons continue beneath lighter curtains and open windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell marks the hour, while servants carry coal, water, books, or trays through the house. By evening, the heiress may be tired in a way that seems difficult to explain. She has not worked in a kitchen, crossed a muddy field, or stood behind a shop counter, yet she has spent the day being shaped. Language, posture, music, belief, appearance, silence, and conversation are all becoming part of the same education. She is learning that a woman born into great wealth must know far more than how to spend money. She must know how to appear as though everything comes naturally. And gradually, as childhood retreats and adolescence draws nearer, the lessons become less about what she knows and more about the person society expects her to become. As adolescence approaches, the heiress becomes increasingly aware that clothing is not simply something worn for warmth or modesty. It is a language, carefully read by relatives, visitors, photographers, servants, dressmakers, and other women whose trained eyes can notice at once whether a sleeve is fashionable, whether a hem is appropriate, whether a jewel is too elaborate for the hour, or whether a young woman is trying too hard to be noticed. Her day may begin before she's fully decided what mood she's in. A maid enters quietly, opening curtains to admit the grey morning light. Water is brought for washing if the room does not have convenient plumbing, and the dressing table is prepared with brushes, combs, pins, powders, bottles, and folded linen. The rituals are more elaborate than those of childhood now. There are undergarments to arrange, stockings to fasten, layers to smooth, and hair to manage before the outer dress is even considered. The corset is among the most familiar objects of this world, although its actual use is more complicated than later caricatures sometimes suggest. A well-fitted corset supports the body and shapes the fashionable silhouette, but tight lacing can certainly become uncomfortable, especially when ideals of narrow waists are pursued aggressively. Some women tighten their corsets only moderately, others endure much more. No one can quite agree how commonly extreme tight lacing occurred among wealthy American women, because fashion magazines, satire, medical warnings, photographs, and private accounts do not always describe the same reality. Still, the corset is present. It is usually worn over a chemise rather than directly against the skin, helping protect it from perspiration and reducing the need for frequent washing. Corset covers, drawers, petticoats, and other layers follow according to fashion and season. By the time the heiress is finally dressed, she may be wearing a surprising amount of fabric beneath the visible gown. In winter, those layers are welcome. A mansion may look magnificent, but large rooms are difficult to heat evenly. Corridors can be drafty, windows cold, and marble floors unforgiving. Wool undergarments, heavier petticoats, gloves, and fur-trimmed outerwear provide practical protection when the family ventures outside. The custom feels distant from the fur-lined cloaks of medieval noblewomen, yet the principle is nearly identical. In a stone manor or castle centuries earlier, layers of linen and wool mattered because rooms were cold. Winds crept through shutters, and even a roaring hearth warmed only part of a hall. The Gilded Age mansion possesses boilers, coal furnaces, and elaborate grates, but winter still has ways of entering through the edges. Morning dress tends to be simpler than evening clothing. A young woman might wear something suitable for breakfast, correspondence, lessons, or household activities before changing later in the day. If she receives callers, goes shopping, takes a carriage ride, attends luncheon, or appears at a formal dinner, another costume may be required. This means dressing is not a single event. It is a rhythm. Clothes are changed because time itself has rules. There are walking dresses, calling dresses, tea gowns, dinner gowns, ball gowns, travelling suits, morning clothes, riding habits, and garments intended for particular social circumstances. The wealthy can afford these distinctions, and therefore society expects them to observe them. The maid becomes essential. She knows which hooks are difficult to reach, which bodice needs adjustment, which gloves belong with which coat, and which dress has a missing button that must be repaired before evening. She brushes fabric, removes dust, airs garments, and coordinates with laundresses or seamstresses. She also learns the heiress's private frustrations. Perhaps a collar scratches, perhaps a shoe pinches, perhaps the fashionable hairstyle seems impossible to keep in place. Perhaps an evening gown admired by everyone else feels heavy and restrictive after an hour. Clothing that appears effortless in photographs often demands constant attention behind closed doors. Hair requires its own ceremony. Depending upon the decade, the fashionable shape changes. Hair may be swept upward, arranged into coils, waved around the forehead, or built into softer structures that create volume. Hairpins, combs, pads, and false pieces can help produce the desired effect. The use of additional hair is not particularly unusual. Women save their own combings, purchase hair pieces, or have arrangements made to match their natural colour. Small receptacles, sometimes called hair receivers, sit on dressing tables to collect loose strands removed from combs and brushes. Those strands may later be used for padding hairstyles or decorative hair work. It is one of those intimate objects rarely visible in grand portraits. A jewelled woman may appear beneath a chandelier with every strand perfectly arranged, while somewhere in her bedroom a little covered container holds the ordinary evidence of how that elegance was assembled. There are beliefs surrounding beauty as well. Skin should appear clear and pale in many fashionable circles, partly because an untanned complexion traditionally suggests that a woman does not labour outdoors. Parasols, gloves, hats, veils, and powders help preserve that appearance. Some cosmetic preparations contain ingredients that modern users would avoid entirely, including lead compounds in earlier products or other substances capable of irritating the skin. Remedies for blemishes circulate through magazines, households, and beauty manuals, and rosewater, cold creams, lemon preparations, almond mixtures, borax, oatmeal washes, and various tonics are recommended with great confidence. Some undoubtedly soothe the skin, others probably do little. Those who promoted them rarely expressed much uncertainty. Jewellery comes later, and it is governed by age and occasion. A young unmarried woman may be expected to wear less imposing pieces than a married society hostess. Pearls, small brooches, lockets, bracelets, and family gifts can appear before heavier diamonds become socially appropriate. Even stones possess meanings. Pearls suggest refinement and youth. Mourning jewellery may incorporate black materials or even woven hair. Lockets can conceal miniature portraits or tiny keepsakes, turning ornament into private memory. By late afternoon, the room may be filled with quiet activity. A dress lies across the bed, gloves rest beside a small evening bag, a maid checks a fastening near the shoulder, hairpins glint on the dressing table. Beyond the windows, the daylight thins over rooftops, while carriage lamps begin appearing below. The mansion settles toward evening. Fires glow behind brass screens. Footsteps soften along carpeted corridors. Somewhere downstairs, silver is being placed beside porcelain, and the dining room is prepared beneath electric lamps or gaslight. The heiress studies her reflection once more. What she sees is partly herself and partly the result of many hands. A dressmaker has shaped the gown. A maid has fastened it. A hairdresser may have arranged her hair. A jeweller has provided the sparkle. Family expectations have determined what is appropriate. Fashion has dictated the silhouette, and society will decide whether the finished appearance succeeds. For a woman raised in this world, dressing is never entirely private. It is preparation for being seen. Over time, she becomes skilled at the process. She learns which colours flatter her, how long she can tolerate particular shoes, how to sit without crushing a delicate skirt, and how to lift a train when climbing stairs. These practical details are rarely mentioned in society columns, yet they make up much of the hidden labour behind elegance. By the time she leaves her room, she may look composed enough to suggest that no effort was required at all. That, perhaps, is the final purpose of the ritual. The hours of fastening, pinning, brushing, lacing, adjusting, and choosing are meant to disappear. Only the finished heiress descends the staircase, polished and prepared. While behind her the dressing room remains scattered with the quiet evidence of everything it took to create the illusion. Morning in the mansion rarely begins with the family. Long before the heiress appears at the breakfast table, the hidden parts of the household are already awake. In the kitchen, fires are lit or revived, kettles are brought to heat, bread is sliced, coffee is prepared, and eggs, fish, meat, or fruit are arranged according to the family's habits. In service rooms, silver is polished, napkins folded, and trays organised with a precision that would seem excessive in an ordinary home but entirely normal in a house where nearly every meal is a performance of order. The heiress may rise to the sound of distant movement. A maid passes through the corridor, a door closes softly, a clock strikes the quarter hour. By the time she comes downstairs, dressed for the morning, the machinery of the house has been operating for hours. Breakfast is often less formal than dinner, but that does not make it casual. The room may be smaller than the grand dining room used in the evening. A breakfast room can feel more intimate, with morning light coming through tall windows and fewer servants in attendance. Yet the table remains carefully arranged. China, silverware, folded linen, toast racks, preserved dishes, and coffee services all occupy their proper places. The food varies with family taste and fashion. There may be eggs, toast, rolls, bacon, ham, fish, fruit, porridge, or hot cereals. Coffee is common, tea remains important. In especially elaborate households, the family can choose from several dishes even on an ordinary morning, a luxury made possible by cooks and kitchen staff who have been working since before dawn. The heiress eats without necessarily seeing the effort behind the meal. This is one of the defining features of life in a great house. Labour is everywhere, yet its success depends upon becoming almost invisible. A servant enters before a dish is needed and withdraws before attention settles on him. Plates disappear quietly, coffee is refilled, a dropped napkin is recovered, a message is delivered to the door rather than across the room. The ideal service creates the impression that the house itself anticipates desire. That illusion requires discipline. In a large Gilded Age household, servants exist within their own strict hierarchy. At the upper levels may stand the butler, housekeeper, cook, valet, and lady's maid. Beneath them are footmen, chambermaids, kitchen maids, laundresses, scullery workers, coachmen, grooms, and others whose titles and duties differ from house to house. The structure is not entirely unlike the organisation of medieval great households, where stewards, chamber servants, cooks, stable workers, and clerks each occupied recognised places beneath the lord and lady of the manor. In a medieval hall, servants might carry pottage, ale, smoked fish, or meat to long tables while rushes covered the floor and soot gathered among the rafters. Here, the food arrives on fine porcelain beneath electric light, but status is still measured partly by who serves and who is served. Some customs survive because hierarchy itself is remarkably durable. Servants are expected to know where they belong. The family is expected not to confuse the arrangement. A young heiress may have known certain servants since infancy, yet formal boundaries remain. She might be affectionate toward an old nurse or trust a maid with personal worries, but she's also being trained to understand that the household cannot function if everyone behaves as social equals. No one can quite agree how rigid these relationships were in every wealthy American home. Some families were remembered as warm and informal, others maintained rules resembling those of European aristocratic houses, with servants expected to remain nearly silent unless addressed. Breakfast can reveal these differences in small ways. One father reads newspapers without speaking much, another discusses business, a mother reviews invitations or plans for the day. Children appear only at certain meals. Guests may join the family if they have stayed overnight, though seating arrangements and the level of formality depend on who they are. For the heiress, breakfast is also a place where the family's emotional weather becomes visible. A strained marriage can make a bright room feel cold. A disagreement about money may be hidden beneath polite questions about the day's schedule. A daughter whose behaviour at a previous evening's dinner has displeased her mother may receive correction in carefully restrained language. The wealthy household values control. Anger is not supposed to spill noisily across the table. Embarrassment should be contained. Private problems are handled privately because reputation is part of the family fortune. This can make the room feel oddly quiet even when several people are present. After eating, correspondence begins. Letters are central to Gilded Age life. Telephones exist and gradually become more common, but written notes remain essential to social organisation. Invitations arrive, calling cards are delivered, replies must be sent. A hostess may write several notes before luncheon, and a young heiress begins learning the same habits. Certain messages require particular forms. Acceptances should be prompt. Declinations should be courteous. Condolences demand careful wording. Thank you notes are expected after visits, gifts, or hospitality. The physical objects matter too. Stationery can be engraved. Paper quality communicates refinement. Monograms appear on writing materials, ink, blotting paper, envelopes, sealing devices, and small desk accessories create a world of communication that feels slower than the modern one but is not necessarily less demanding. One curious custom involves calling cards, which can carry subtle information according to how they are delivered or marked. A card left at a residence might indicate that someone has called while the family was absent. In earlier 19th century practice, even folded corners could convey specific meanings, though by the later Gilded Age such rules varied and were already changing. Those who wrote etiquette manuals sometimes disagreed about the exact details, which suggests that even the people living by these codes occasionally found them confusing. After correspondence, the heiress's day begins to divide. There may be lessons, dress fittings, shopping, charitable visits, carriage drives, music practice, luncheon engagements, or meetings with relatives. Every activity requires servants to adjust around her. The carriage must be ready. The maid must know which dress is needed. The kitchen must know whether she will be home for luncheon. The housekeeper must prepare for expected guests. Information flows downward through the mansion with the quiet efficiency of a small institution. Meanwhile, servants have their own meals. They do not usually sit with the family. In many houses, they eat in a servants' hall or kitchen area at separate times, often under the authority of the butler or housekeeper. Their food may be perfectly adequate, sometimes quite good, but the distinction is essential. The family breakfast above stairs and the servants' meal below belong to two worlds occupying the same building. As morning advances, sunlight moves across polished floors. Coal smoke rises beyond neighbouring roofs, carriage wheels sound on the street. Somewhere in the house, a bell rings for a servant, brief and sharp, then disappears into silence. The heiress may hardly notice it. That is partly the point. The great mansion is designed to protect her from inconvenience, but it also protects her from understanding how much organisation is required to sustain that protection. A cup of hot coffee appears, a clean dress waits, a carriage arrives. A letter is carried away. A fire burns in the grate. Each comfort is attached to another person's mourning, and slowly, almost unconsciously, the heiress learns the peculiar discipline of privilege to live inside a world crowded with labour while being encouraged to see only the finished result. By the time the heiress reaches her middle teenage years, her education begins to shift away from the schoolroom and into the drawing room. Books still matter, music and languages still matter, but another curriculum now surrounds her, one with no final examination and no single teacher. It is taught by mothers, aunts, older cousins, governesses, hostesses, servants, and the silent judgment of society itself. She is learning how to be seen. In the Gilded Age, respectable society is held together by countless small rules. Many are never written down because everyone within the circle is expected to know them already. A young woman must understand when she may visit, whom she may receive, how long she should remain in another person's home, which invitations require formal replies, and which acquaintances are intimate enough to justify a less ceremonious manner. A mistake is rarely disastrous, but repeated mistakes can become a reputation, and reputation, for an heiress, carries unusual weight. A family with millions of dollars may purchase houses, horses, paintings, yachts, and almost every physical luxury available. What it cannot purchase quite so easily is unquestioned social acceptance. New fortunes are often regarded suspiciously by families who consider themselves established. Old money may mock new money. New money may resent old exclusiveness. Behind polite smiles, people remember who arrived recently, whose father sold dry goods, whose grandfather was a mechanic, whose fortune came from railroads, and whose family claims ancestry stretching back to colonial America. The heiress must learn how to move through all of this without appearing to notice any of it. Calling is one of her earliest exercises. Formal visits are usually short. A woman may travel by carriage from house to house, leaving cards or spending perhaps 15 minutes in a drawing room before moving on. Certain days of the week may be designated as reception days. When a hostess expects callers, the visitor arrives properly dressed, is announced by a servant, exchanges a few minutes of conversation, and leaves before the visit becomes burdensome. The simplicity is deceptive. There are rules about whom to call upon after an introduction, how soon to call after a dinner, whether a daughter accompanies her mother, and when a newly arrived family should wait for established society to make the first move. Etiquette manuals try to clarify these matters, though they often contradict one another. No one can quite agree whether every household followed the most intricate rules described in such books. What is clear is that the general principle mattered greatly. Social relationships had to be maintained through visible acts of attention. The calling card becomes almost an extension of the person. A name engraved on thick paper can announce presence without requiring a conversation. Cards are left for families recovering from illness, after introductions, following certain invitations, or simply as part of the ongoing maintenance of acquaintance. A silver tray near the entrance may collect them. To an outsider, it might seem strange that a small rectangle of paper can carry so much significance, but older societies had possessed similar symbols of recognition. A medieval pilgrim might pin a badge from a saint's shrine to a cloak, quietly announcing where he had travelled and what devotion he had performed. A messenger might carry a seal to prove whom he represented. In the Gilded Age drawing room, engraved paper serves a gentler purpose, yet it still tells others who has come, who belongs, and who wishes to be remembered. The heiress learns to read these signs. She also learns the importance of chaperonage. An unmarried young woman of respectable family is generally not expected to spend private time alone with an unrelated man. The exact strictness varies according to family issue, location, and decade, but supervision remains important. A mother, married sister, aunt, governess, or another approved woman may accompany her to dances, dinners, concerts, carriage rides, and other social occasions. The chaperone does not necessarily hover beside her every moment. Her presence is often enough. Society understands that boundaries exist. A young couple may converse at a reception, or walk a short distance through a crowded garden. Yet entirely private meetings risk gossip. Even an innocent encounter can become troublesome if it appears secretive. For a wealthy heiress, gossip is especially dangerous because people are already interested in her. Her fortune makes her romantic life public property long before she's old enough to make sense of that fact. Newspapers increasingly report on society. Columnists describe dinners, engagements, weddings, arrivals at summer resorts, fashionable clothing, and rumours circulating through elite circles. A young woman may open a newspaper and find the name of someone she knows printed there, perhaps with details that everyone assumed had been private. This creates a strange sort of vigilance. She must be gracious without seeming flirtatious, friendly without appearing indiscriminate, interested without appearing eager, reserved without seeming arrogant. There is no perfect formula. Some girls naturally enjoy the social world and develop the ability to move through it almost effortlessly. Others find the constant performance exhausting. They sit through long calls, smile at acquaintances they barely remember, and quietly count the minutes until they can return home. Even conversations have boundaries. Subjects such as money, bodily illness, personal scandal, and certain political disputes are often considered inappropriate in mixed polite company. Religion can become dangerous if discussed too forcefully. Business is more acceptable among men than at the dinner table with women. A young lady should be able to converse about books, music, travel, art, mutual acquaintances, and current events without becoming argumentative. The skill is not to display everything she knows, it is to make conversation easy. Listening becomes as important as speaking. A successful society woman remembers names, relatives, illnesses, journeys, and previous conversations. If an older guest mentioned a sick sister 2 weeks ago, remembering to ask after her can matter more than delivering a brilliant observation. This kind of social memory is labour. It simply does not look like labour. Mothers often guide daughters closely through it. A mother may quietly explain why one family must be treated with special deference, why another acquaintance should remain distant, or why an invitation that seems harmless should be declined. Social circles are mapped almost like territories. Some houses are considered proper. Some people are fashionable, but unreliable. Some families are tolerated because of money. Others possess impressive names, but very little money left. The heiress begins to understand that the glittering world around her is held together by calculations rarely spoken aloud. Friendships can therefore be complicated. A schoolroom companion from childhood may not belong to the same adult social circle. A charming new acquaintance may be discouraged because her family has suffered scandal. A young woman considered too unconventional can become dangerous company, not because she has done anything truly harmful, but because she ignores rules others regard as essential. The discipline extends to public spaces. When shopping, the heiress is accompanied. When attending church, she sits with family. When walking, she observes conventions about dress and company. At concerts or the theatre, seating itself may reflect rank and visibility. She is constantly present in public while being expected to behave as though she does not seek public attention. The paradox can become tiring. By late afternoon, after several calls or a luncheon, she may return to the mansion and finally remove her gloves. The quiet of her private room feels different after hours of conversation. Outside, winter light fades between buildings. A carriage rattles somewhere beyond the gates, curtains are drawn, fires are tended, and lamps begin glowing one by one. The atmosphere softens. For a little while, there is no need to remember whether a card has been returned or whether a hostess should be thanked. Yet tomorrow, the social machinery will begin again. These customs may seem trivial beside the enormous fortunes and grand houses of the age, but they shape the heiress profoundly. They teach her that belonging is never completely secure. It must be renewed through visits, invitations, appearances, and careful behaviour, and soon the lessons become more serious. The dresses grow more elaborate, the guest lists grow larger, music carries farther into the night. The young woman who has practiced society in drawing rooms and afternoon calls is approaching the moment when she will be formally presented to it, no longer merely as someone's daughter, but as a possible wife, hostess, and keeper of a powerful family name. When the season finally arrives, the heiress discovers that all those years of lessons, fittings, calls, and careful observation have been preparing her for a remarkably public transformation. She's no longer simply a daughter appearing beside her mother at selected events. She's about to be presented formally to society, and with that presentation comes a new kind of attention. The debutante season is not one single evening. It is a succession of dinners, receptions, teas, balls, theatre parties, concerts, luncheons, carriage calls, and introductions that may stretch across months. In New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Newport, Washington, and other centres of wealth, the details differ, but the purpose remains recognizable. A young woman of the right age and family is brought forward into adult society, where she will be seen, assessed, remembered, and quietly discussed. Her mother often manages much of the process. Guest lists are examined with extraordinary care, invitations are engraved and sent, rooms are decorated, florists arrive with arrangements that may fill staircases, mantelpieces, and conservatories with roses, lilies, palms, or seasonal greenery. Musicians are hired, supper menus are planned, extra servants may be brought in for the evening, a single ball can demand days of preparation. The heiress herself waits at the centre of it all, although she controls surprisingly little. Her gown has already been chosen with the help of dressmakers, relatives, and perhaps designers in Paris or New York. Pale colours are often favoured for unmarried young women. White is especially associated with youth and presentation, though fashion changes constantly. Silk, satin, lace, embroidery, ribbons, and carefully arranged flowers may transform the dress into something closer to architecture than ordinary clothing. A train trails behind her. Gloves extend above the elbow. A fan may be carried. Jewellery is selected with restraint compared with that of older married women, yet even restrained jewellery in a millionaire's household can include pearls, diamonds, or heirloom pieces worth more than an ordinary worker might earn in many years. The preparation begins well before guests arrive. Hair must be arranged, the gown must be fitted once more, gloves must remain spotless. Shoes, often delicate and unsuitable for anything beyond polished floors, are checked. The maid knows where extra pins are hidden and which fastening tends to come loose. Some young women are excited, others are terrified. Their private letters sometimes reveal headaches, exhaustion, dread, or a desperate hope that an evening will end well. No one can quite agree how many debutantes genuinely enjoyed the spectacle, and how many simply learned to endure it gracefully, because public photographs tend to preserve smiles rather than fatigue. When the first carriages begin to arrive, the mansion changes. Doors open repeatedly, footmen receive cloaks, names are announced. The entrance hall fills with perfume, damp winter air, silk, polished shoes, and low voices. Outside, carriage lamps glow in darkness. Inside, chandeliers scatter light across mirrors and gilded frames. The heiress stands beside her mother. For what may feel like a very long time, she greets people. Older women lean close to offer congratulations. Men bow. Family acquaintances repeat phrases she has already heard several times. Distant relatives appear. Young men are introduced. Other debutantes arrive in clouds of pale fabric, each facing the same ritual. The entire evening is built around movement, yet the first duty is simply to stand still and receive. There is something almost ceremonial about it, not entirely unlike older forms of presentation at court. In medieval and early modern noble households, daughters of powerful families might be brought into royal or aristocratic circles where marriages, alliances, and reputations were quietly negotiated beneath the language of hospitality. Those halls were illuminated by beeswax candles, their floors perhaps strewn with rushes, their walls hung with textiles to keep out the cold. The Gilded Age ballroom replaces the old hall with parquet floors, crystal chandeliers, palms in painted pots, and electric light. But the watching remains. Once dancing begins, the pressure shifts. Dance cards may be used, especially earlier in the period, allowing women to record which partner has claimed each dance. A small booklet hangs from the wrist by a cord, sometimes with a tiny pencil attached. Its pages can become a miniature social map of the evening. Who asks first matters. Who appears repeatedly matters. Who does not ask at all may matter even more. Young men understand that wealthy heiresses attract attention for reasons extending beyond affection. Some are sons of American industrial families, others belong to established East Coast society. Still others come from European aristocratic families whose titles are impressive even when their estates are burdened by debt. The heiress may know very little about these calculations while dancing. Or she may understand them perfectly. The waltz carries couples across the floor beneath chandeliers. Earlier generations once considered the dance rather daring, because partners held one another more closely than older formal dances allowed. By the late 19th century it has become respectable in elite society, although some conservative observers still dislike the physical freedom it represents. The orchestra continues. A quadrille may follow, then another waltz. The heiress learns quickly that a ball requires endurance. Her corset remains firm around her waist. Her shoes grow less comfortable. The train of her gown must be managed carefully. Conversation repeats itself. Rooms become warmer as hundreds of candles, gas fixtures, or electric lamps combine with the heat of gathered bodies. Yet she must appear fresh. A society evening rewards the illusion that nobody is tired. Servants circulate with refreshments. Behind closed doors, kitchen staff work rapidly, plates are prepared, glasses washed, bottles opened, dishes carried upward. A formal supper may appear late in the evening, sometimes after midnight, with cold meats, oysters, salads, sweets, ices, cakes, champagne, and other delicacies depending upon the household. The contrast between ballroom and kitchen is striking. Above stairs, a woman may complain that she has danced too much. Below stairs, someone has been standing beside a hot range for hours. In older manor houses, cooks once roasted meat over open fires while scullions carried wood and servants hauled water across stone floors. The technology has changed greatly, but large entertainments still depend upon workers moving continuously, while guests experience only the finished feast. There are curious beliefs attached to social success as well. Flowers may be chosen for symbolic meaning. Certain colours are considered flattering or unlucky by particular families. A young woman might keep a pressed blossom from an important evening, preserve a dance card, or tuck a tiny charm into a glove or handbag. Such private superstitions rarely appear in formal etiquette books, but diaries and family traditions suggest that even highly sophisticated households kept small rituals of luck. Some mothers believe strongly in timing. A daughter should not appear too eager. She should not dance too often with the same man. She should not disappear into a conservatory for too long. Conservatories, in fact, acquire a peculiar reputation as semi-private spaces where couples might speak beyond the immediate hearing of chaperones. Palms, ferns, fountains, and shadowed corners create a softer world beyond the ballroom. Though the freedom remains limited, a chaperone is never far away. Neither is gossip, By 2 or 3 in the morning, the mansion finally begins to empty. Carriages pull away one by one, cloaks are reclaimed, flowers droop slightly in the heat, musicians pack instruments, servants begin clearing glasses from windowsills and abandoned corners. The heiress returns upstairs. Her room feels strangely quiet after the ballroom. Pins are removed from her hair, the gown is loosened, gloves are peeled from tired hands. Outside, the streets are nearly silent, and a faint greyness may already be gathering beyond the roofs. For society, the evening has been a success if the guests were impressed. For the heiress, success is hard to define. Perhaps she danced with someone she liked. Perhaps she remembered every introduction. Perhaps no embarrassing rumour began. Perhaps she simply survived several hours of being watched. And now that she's been formally presented, the attention will not fade. It will sharpen, because among the men who bowed, danced, and exchanged polite conversation beneath those chandeliers, some may soon begin visiting the house for reasons that have very little to do with dancing. Once the heiress has entered society, invitations begin to carry a different weight. A dinner is no longer simply a dinner. A carriage ride may be noticed. A name repeated twice in a conversation can be remembered by an aunt, a mother, or a columnist. Even a dance that seemed insignificant to the young woman involved may become material for speculation by the following afternoon. Courtship in the Gilded Age rarely belongs entirely to the two people most concerned. It unfolds within families. A young man who shows interest in an heiress is observed almost as carefully as she is. His manners matter, of course, but manners alone are not enough. His family background is examined, his education is considered, his habits are discussed quietly, his income, debts, prospects, religion, health, and reputation may all become subjects of inquiry before anyone publicly admits that a serious attachment exists. Money makes the process more complicated. A woman expected to inherit millions is attractive for reasons that have little to do with affection, and everyone understands this even when no one says it directly. A young man from an established but financially weakened family may see marriage as a way to restore an estate. An ambitious American may hope to join two industrial fortunes. A European aristocrat might possess an ancient title and a crumbling country house, but very little cash. The heiress herself is often expected to distinguish genuine admiration from financial calculation. That is not an easy task. A charming man can be charming for many reasons. No one can quite agree how often wealthy young women were fully aware of the financial negotiations surrounding their courtships. Some surviving letters show daughters discussing money and marriage with remarkable realism. Others suggest that parents deliberately shielded them from the most practical calculations until an engagement was already likely. Much depends upon the family. Some mothers encourage a daughter to marry for affection, provided the man is respectable. Others think first of position. Some fathers care intensely about the husband's business judgment. Others distrust any suitor who appears too interested in the family fortune. The result is a courtship conducted under layers of observation. A young man may begin by calling at the house. His card is delivered. If the family receives him, he enters a drawing room rather than wandering freely through private parts of the mansion. The heiress may appear with her mother, sister, aunt, or another acceptable companion nearby. Conversation takes place among upholstered chairs, small tables, photographs, flowers, and carefully chosen decorative objects. Tea may be served. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. Indeed, respectability depends partly upon the absence of drama. They discuss music, travel, books, mutual acquaintances, horses, perhaps the previous evening's reception. If he has recently returned from Europe, he may describe Paris or London. If the family spends summers at Newport, plans for the season provide an easy subject. Meanwhile, the mother listens. Perhaps she appears absorbed in embroidery or correspondence. She is not. Every detail can matter. An overeager compliment may seem vulgar. Too much familiarity can be dangerous. A young man who behaves perfectly toward the heiress but dismissively toward servants may reveal more than he intends. Servants themselves often know that a courtship is developing long before an engagement is announced. A maid notices which flowers arrive. A footman sees which gentleman calls repeatedly. The butler recognizes a familiar coat and hat at the door. The coachman knows when a particular destination is requested more often than usual. The official household may remain discreet, but a great house has ears. This is hardly new. Centuries earlier, in a medieval manor or castle, courtship among noble families was similarly difficult to keep private. Chamber servants, clerks, ladies-in-waiting, stable hands, and household chaplains might all become accidental witnesses to a developing attachment. Letters were sealed carefully, messengers trusted selectively, and meetings could occur in gardens, chapels, galleries, or halls where privacy was always uncertain. A medieval noblewoman might wear a pilgrim badge, keep a saint's relic near her bed, or carry a small protective charm stitched into clothing. Her Gilded Age descendant is more likely to keep a pressed flower, a photograph, a dance card, or a folded note in a private drawer. The impulse is much the same. Affection creates objects. A flower sent after a dinner may be preserved between the pages of a book. A photograph of a young man may sit behind other pictures on a dressing table where only the maid is likely to notice it. Letters are tied with ribbon and placed inside boxes. Correspondence becomes particularly important because written words allow slightly greater intimacy than public conversation. Yet even letters are not always entirely private. Parents may expect to know who is writing. Some daughters understand that a mother could ask to see a letter. Servants handle envelopes before they reach the recipient. A misplaced note can become a small catastrophe. For this reason, language may remain cautious. Affection is expressed gradually. A gentleman who wishes to move beyond casual acquaintance usually needs clearer access to the family. He may be invited to dinner more frequently or included in country house gatherings where interaction becomes easier. Country estates provide a peculiar kind of freedom. There are horseback rides, walks, lawn games, boating, picnics, and long afternoons where conversation can unfold more naturally than during a 15-minute formal call. Still, chaperonage remains. A sister rides nearby. A cousin joins the walk. A mother observes from the veranda. Even a large garden has social boundaries. The young pair may manage moments of privacy, but complete solitude can provoke questions. Superstitions surrounding love also survive in surprisingly sophisticated households. Young women sometimes attach meaning to dreams, flowers, initials, cards, or small fortune-telling games. Certain blossoms carry romantic associations. A broken mirror is still widely feared as unlucky. Some people consult popular dream books that claim to explain what it means to dream of weddings, water, rings, or particular animals. Such beliefs coexist comfortably with telephones, electric lighting, railroads, and modern medicine. Human beings do not abandon old hopes merely because technology improves. For the heiress, however, the most serious question is not whether a charm predicts love. It is whether love itself can survive the scrutiny surrounding her fortune. A suitor may seem attentive, but would he have been equally attentive if she possessed no inheritance? Her family may approve of a man, but do they approve because he makes her happy, or because his name strengthens theirs? A titled European offers grandeur, but perhaps also debts. A wealthy American offers financial security, but perhaps little warmth. A respectable family may conceal private unhappiness behind impeccable manners. The heiress must make decisions while possessing incomplete information. So must everyone else. Those who recorded these marriages later often disagreed about whether certain unions began in affection, ambition, family pressure, or some mixture of all three. Human motives are rarely neat enough for account books. Meanwhile, the courtship continues in small, repetitive ways. Flowers arrive in the morning. A card appears on a silver tray. At dinner, a particular seat seems conveniently arranged. At the opera, a familiar figure appears in a neighbouring box. During a dance, the same man requests another waltz. Nothing is officially declared, yet the household begins to sense a pattern. The mother may become more watchful. The father may ask quiet questions through business acquaintances. A brother might investigate a gentleman's reputation at clubs. Even servants notice whether the flowers are becoming more expensive. Outside, autumn rain taps against tall windows. Carriages move through wet streets, wheels shining beneath gas lamps. Inside, coal settles softly in the grate, and the drawing room grows warmer as evening gathers around the curtains. The heiress sits beneath lamplight with a letter folded in her lap. For once, the grand house seems almost intimate. Beyond the door, however, the household continues moving. A maid crosses the corridor. A servant descends the back stairs. Somewhere below, Dishes are being washed and tomorrow's arrangements discussed. Privacy in such a house is always partial, so is courtship. And if the young man's attention continues, there will eventually come a moment when polite calls and dances are no longer enough. Families will begin to speak more plainly. Money will be discussed. Lawyers may become involved. Property will be considered, and the quiet possibility of romance will begin its transformation into something far more formal, a marriage capable of joining not only two people, but two names, two fortunes, and two carefully guarded worlds. Once a courtship begins to look serious, the atmosphere around the heiress changes almost imperceptibly. The flowers continue to arrive, calls are still made, dinners are still attended, yet beneath these familiar gestures, practical questions begin gathering like papers on a lawyer's desk. Marriage among the very wealthy is rarely treated as a purely private decision. It is emotional, certainly, it may even be romantic, but it is also legal, financial, social, and dynastic. A marriage can alter the direction of a fortune, strengthen a family's status, connect businesses, revive an old name, or carry American money into a European estate whose roof is leaking faster than its owner can repair it. The heiress may understand only part of what is being discussed on her behalf. Her father speaks with attorneys, her mother exchanges letters with relatives. Bankers may be consulted, property is valued, trusts are examined. If the prospective husband possesses a title, land, or foreign inheritance, the situation can become even more complicated. The engagement itself is usually announced only after the most important family questions have been settled. Before that moment, the household may exist in a strange state of secrecy that is not truly secret at all. Servants know something is happening, friends suspect, society columns circle patiently. Then, at last, the announcement appears. Congratulations begin arriving almost immediately. Flowers fill rooms, cards are delivered, letters pile onto trays. The heiress receives visitors who wish to admire the engagement ring and hear the approved version of the story. The ring itself carries meaning. Diamonds become increasingly common for wealthy engagements during this period, though customs vary widely. Some rings contain coloured stones, others use family jewels reset into new designs. The symbolism matters, but so does the stone's quality, and society is not above noticing size. An engagement is supposed to be joyful. It is also another public performance. The young woman is expected to appear happy but not foolishly excited, affectionate but not indiscreet. Her fiancé gains somewhat greater access to the household, though social boundaries do not disappear overnight. There are still rules, there are still chaperones, and there is still plenty of time for families to change their minds. Broken engagements are deeply embarrassing, particularly when newspapers have already reported them. Gifts may need to be returned, letters must be handled carefully, explanations are kept vague if possible. No one can quite agree how often wealthy families pressured daughters to continue engagements they wished to end. Private correspondence reveals examples of resistance, persuasion, emotional conflict, and outright coercion. But circumstances differed enormously from one household to another. For some heiresses, engagement is genuinely happy. For others, it is the moment when choice begins to narrow. The financial arrangements can be formidable. In older legal traditions, marriage often placed a woman's property under significant control of her husband. By the late 19th century, married women's property laws in the United States had improved women's legal rights substantially, though details varied by state and by circumstance. Wealthy families also rely on trusts and marriage settlements. Money may be protected so that a husband cannot simply spend the entire inheritance. An heiress might receive income from a trust while the principal remains controlled by trustees. Property may be settled upon her separately. Provisions can be made for future children. Lawyers attempt to anticipate problems before they happen. They are not always successful. Marriage contracts lack the romance of bouquets and ballroom music, but they can determine far more about the bride's future than the wedding cake does. Families understand this. A father who spent decades building an industrial fortune may have little desire to hand unrestricted control of it to a son-in-law with expensive habits. A European nobleman, meanwhile, may require a very large settlement before marriage because his ancestral estate is burdened by mortgages, taxes, repairs, and generations of accumulated debt. This exchange produces one of the most famous social patterns of the Gilded Age, wealthy American women marrying titled European men. The arrangement is often simplified into a bargain of dollars for titles, and sometimes it truly resembles one. Yet individual marriages vary. Some couples love each other, some become affectionate companions, some are miserable almost immediately. The families involved may describe the match in elegant language, while accountants quietly calculate exactly how much money will cross the Atlantic. The practice has older echoes. Centuries earlier, medieval noble marriages could transfer land, dowries, political influence, and military alliances. A daughter might leave her childhood manor wrapped in wool and fur, travelling along muddy roads toward a husband chosen partly for the advantage of two families. Contracts could specify property rights in careful detail, while chapels glowed with beeswax candles and priests invoked saints over unions shaped as much by inheritance as affection. The Gilded Age heiress travels by steamship instead of horseback. Her marriage documents are prepared by modern attorneys rather than clerks writing on parchment. But the family calculation remains surprisingly recognizable. Wedding preparations begin as soon as the engagement becomes secure. Dressmakers become central figures once again. A wedding gown may require weeks or months of work. Silk, satin, lace, pearls, embroidery, and intricate hand finishing can transform it into one of the most expensive garments the bride will ever wear. Veils are carefully chosen. Family lace may be incorporated. Jewellery can carry sentimental meaning. A bride may follow the familiar custom of wearing something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, a rhyme that becomes widely known during the Victorian era. Other beliefs survive beside it. Some families regard particular days as luckier for weddings than others. Rain can be interpreted either as unfortunate or as a blessing, depending upon which relative is speaking. Dropping the ring, tearing the veil, or seeing certain omens on the morning of the ceremony may produce genuine anxiety. Modern sophistication has not eliminated superstition. The household becomes busier as the date approaches. Guest lists expand, stationers prepare invitations, florists discuss decorations, musicians are booked, silver is inventoried, servants are warned that the house will operate under unusual pressure. The kitchen prepares for elaborate breakfast, luncheons, or receptions depending upon the ceremony. Wedding gifts begin arriving and may be displayed for visitors to admire, a custom that makes private generosity surprisingly public. Silver services, paintings, jewels, porcelain, furniture, books. Objects arrive bearing cards from families whose names matter. Their value is noticed even when everyone pretends not to notice. The ceremony itself may take place in a prominent church or in the family home. In a church wedding, flowers can transform the interior. Organ music fills the nave. Guests arrive in carefully arranged order. The bride enters on her father's arm, watched by hundreds of eyes. For a few minutes, all the legal documents, negotiations, fortunes, and family ambitions disappear behind ritual. Words are spoken, a ring is placed, two people stand beneath the same promise. Outside, carriages wait in rows. Inside, hats tilt as guests turn for a better view. Afterward comes the reception, where the newly married woman may stand for a long receiving line, greeting guests while scarcely tasting the food prepared in her honour. Champagne flows, cake is cut, toasts are made, servants move behind the celebration like the hidden gears of a clock, and eventually, after the flowers begin to droop and the last formal congratulations are offered, the bride changes into travelling clothes. This is perhaps the quietest transformation of all. She leaves the wedding gown behind. She leaves the bedroom in which she spent her girlhood. She leaves the household whose servants knew her childhood habits. The familiar mansion remains standing, warm behind its curtains, but it is no longer quite her home. As the carriage pulls away, evening gathers over the city. Lamps shimmer along wet pavement. Horses breathe into the cold air. Somewhere a church bell marks the hour with the same calm indifference it has shown through countless engagements, weddings, inheritances, and farewells. The heiress has become a wife. Society may treat that as an arrival. For her, it is something more uncertain. She is moving from the protected world of a daughter into a household where she may soon be expected to command servants, manage appearances, entertain strangers, preserve a marriage, and create the same illusion of effortless order that once surrounded her. Marriage does not free the heiress from household ritual. In many ways, it places her more firmly inside it. The difference is that she is no longer being trained merely to observe, she is expected to direct. When she enters her new home as a married woman, whether it is a townhouse in New York, a country estate beyond the city, or a European residence inherited through her husband, she steps into a domestic structure that may already be functioning with remarkable complexity. Servants know their duties. The cook has established routines. The housekeeper understands the linen closets, storerooms, and cleaning schedules. The butler knows which silver is used for ordinary dinners and which is reserved for distinguished guests. Yet the mistress of the house is expected to understand enough of all this to give the household direction. Her role is both practical and symbolic. A poorly managed house reflects upon her. A smooth one enhances her reputation. The expectation can feel strange for a woman who has spent much of her youth protected from the very labour she must now supervise. She may know how a dinner table should appear without knowing exactly how long it takes to polish the silver. She may recognise a perfect guest room without knowing how many sheets have been boiled, dried, pressed, folded, and carried upstairs to create it. So she learns another form of management. The housekeeper is usually one of her most important allies. In a large residence, the housekeeper oversees much of the female domestic staff, keeps inventories, organises cleaning, supervises linen, and ensures that bedroom, drawing room, corridors, and service spaces remain in proper order. She may meet regularly with the mistress to discuss supplies, staff problems, repairs, and unusual events. The conversations can be brief. A chambermaid is leaving, a rug requires cleaning, a guest room needs preparing, a shipment of linen has arrived. One of the servants is ill. The heiress listens, decides, or delegates. Beneath these small decisions lies an enormous system of repetition. Beds are made, fires are laid, ashes are removed, floors are swept, furniture is dusted, windows are cleaned, curtains are brushed, water is carried where necessary, china is washed and counted. Candles, even in houses increasingly illuminated by gas or electricity, may still be kept for bedrooms, emergencies, decorative use, or places where newer lighting has not fully replaced older habits. Their beeswax glow would have seemed familiar in a medieval hall, though the surrounding world has changed almost beyond recognition. In a castle centuries earlier, the lady of the household might have overseen storerooms filled with grain, salted meat, herbs, wax, cloth, and ale. She might know how much pottage was needed for retainers, which servants were entitled to particular portions, and when wool blankets should be distributed against the winter cold. The Gilded Age mistress manages imported china, French wines, coal deliveries, laundry contracts, floral arrangements, and telephone messages instead. The substances change. The responsibility for maintaining order remains. Menus are another part of her world. The cook may possess considerable authority in the kitchen, especially if trained in French cuisine, but the mistress often approves formal dinner plans or discusses important occasions. A typical grand dinner can contain numerous courses, each presented in deliberate sequence. Oysters may begin the meal, soup follows, fish appears, then meat, poultry, vegetables, salads, sweets, ices, fruit, cheese, or other dishes depending upon fashion and household preference. Wine is matched carefully to courses. The table itself becomes a display. Flowers must be low enough that guests can see one another, unless fashion temporarily encourages towering arrangements. Silver, crystal, porcelain, menu cards, and name cards are arranged with geometric precision. Seating is even more delicate. The heiress may spend longer deciding where people sit than choosing what they eat. A powerful guest should receive a place of honour. Two people who dislike each other should not be trapped side by side. A shy guest may need a good conversationalist nearby. A newly engaged couple might be separated just enough to preserve decorum. Foreign rank can complicate precedence. Old American families have their own expectations. No one can quite agree whether every hostess followed the detailed precedence rules printed in etiquette manuals, but experienced society women clearly understood that a badly arranged table could create irritation long after the meal was forgotten. The hostess must therefore think several moves ahead. At dinner, however, None of that labour should be visible. She enters composed. She speaks warmly. She notices when a guest has been silent too long. She changes the subject if conversation becomes uncomfortable. She directs the evening without appearing to direct anything. This is the hidden craft of elite hospitality. A medieval abbess or noblewoman might once have performed something comparable when travellers arrived at a monastery or manor house. Hospitality was not merely kindness, it was an obligation woven into status. Guests needed food, beds, warmth, stable space, and appropriate recognition according to rank. Pilgrims arriving with mud on their cloaks might be received differently from a noble envoy, yet both entered a household governed by ritual. The Gilded Age mansion has no muddy pilgrims at the gate. Instead, carriages arrive beneath a covered entrance, and guests bring engraved invitations rather than pilgrim badges. But hospitality remains a test of the house. Even smaller gatherings demand preparation. Afternoon tea can require cakes, sandwiches, china, hot water, napkins, flowers, and servants ready to replenish everything without interruption. An overnight guest requires more luggage carried upstairs, fireplaces tended, fresh water, writing materials, towels, soap, and perhaps a breakfast tray at a requested hour. The mistress is rarely the person physically performing these tasks. Her skill lies in ensuring that someone else has remembered them. There is power in this position. There is also dependency. A mistress with poor relations with her staff can find her household surprisingly difficult to manage. Servants possess knowledge she does not. They know which pipes freeze, which staircase creaks, which guest is impossible to please, which supplier cheats on deliveries, and which bedroom chimney smokes when the wind comes from the east. A wise mistress listens. An arrogant one may discover that wealth cannot make a household run smoothly if the people within it are resentful. Turnover among servants is a constant concern. Good cooks are particularly difficult to replace. A skilled lady's maid who understands complex wardrobes can become almost indispensable. Advertisements, recommendations, employment agencies, and personal connections are used to find replacements, while references are checked with great seriousness. There are beliefs and customs around servants too. Some households refuse to hire certain combinations of workers because of old prejudices or personal superstitions. Others distrust a servant who has changed positions too often. A cook may insist on particular remedies for burns or kitchen cuts, using flour, butter, salves, or herbal preparations passed down through experience rather than medical training. Some of these remedies soothe, others may worsen the injury. Those who used them usually trusted familiarity more than theory. By evening, the mansion glows behind drawn curtains. The dining room has emptied. Crystal catches the last light of the chandeliers. Somewhere below stairs, servants sit down to their own late meal while dishes from above are washed and returned to cupboards. In her bedroom, the heiress removes earrings while her maid loosens the gown. The house around her is still working. A footman checks doors. A maid carries hot water. The cook reviews tomorrow's needs. Coal settles softly in a grate. For the first time in her life, the heiress is not simply protected by this machinery. She's responsible for its appearance. And gradually she learns that being mistress of a mansion means creating calm from constant motion, abundance from endless accounting, and effortless hospitality from the labour of dozens of people whose names rarely appear in the society pages. The household does not remain in one place for the entire year. As spring gives way to summer, the heiress's world begins to move. Trunks appear in dressing rooms. Servants begin folding gowns into layers of tissue. Hats are packed into boxes shaped specifically to protect them. Shoes, gloves, riding clothes, evening dresses, parasols, jewellery cases, books, medicines, writing paper, and dozens of small personal objects must be sorted, labelled, and sent ahead. A wealthy family does not simply go on vacation. It relocates a small civilization. For many of the richest families of the Gilded Age, summer means leaving the heat, dust, noise, and unpleasant smells of the city behind. New York becomes particularly uncomfortable during the warmer months. Streets are crowded with horses, garbage accumulates, heat settles between buildings. Those who can afford to leave do so. Newport is among the most famous destinations. Along the Rhode Island coast, extraordinary houses rise above the Atlantic. They are called cottages, though some contain dozens of rooms, marble staircases, ballrooms, libraries, galleries, and enough servants to operate a respectable hotel. The term cottage is one of those gentle absurdities that wealth occasionally produces without intending humour. For the heiress, however, the summer house may feel less formal than the city residence. Windows stand open to sea air. Breakfast may be taken later. There are lawns, verandas, gardens, and views that stretch beyond neighbouring rooftops. Yet leisure has rules. Morning might begin with riding. Horses are brought around by grooms while the family dresses in appropriate riding clothes. For women, the riding habit is carefully tailored, often with a long skirt designed for the side saddle, though riding astride becomes more common as customs change. A hat is secured, gloves are pulled on. The party sets out along roads bordered by hedges, stone walls, or summer fields. Even these apparently relaxed excursions are social occasions. Who rides beside whom matters, which families meet along the road matters, where the group stops matters. A young woman may find herself speaking to the same gentleman who occupied a place near her at dinner the previous evening. Only now the conversation unfolds beneath open sky instead of chandeliers. There is freedom in movement. There is still observation. Later in the morning, carriages carry visitors from house to house. Calling does not disappear merely because the ocean is visible. Afternoons may include lawn tennis, croquet, sailing, picnics, concerts, or long drives along the coast. By the late 19th century, bicycling becomes fashionable as well, and the bicycle gives women a degree of physical independence that some older observers find distinctly unsettling. Clothing adapts gradually. Skirts remain cumbersome, but practical garments begin to emerge. The sight of wealthy young women moving quickly along a road under their own power would have seemed astonishing to earlier generations. The heiress may enjoy the novelty. Her mother may worry about appearances. No one can quite agree how radical ordinary recreational changes felt to the women experiencing them, because what seems symbolic in retrospect may have felt at the time like little more than a pleasant afternoon outdoors. The sea itself creates new rituals. Bathing becomes fashionable, though swimming costumes are far more substantial than modern ones. Women may enter the water wearing wool garments, stockings, shoes, and caps. In earlier decades, bathing machines allowed swimmers to change privately and enter the water with greater modesty. By the Gilded Age, customs are shifting, but respectable behaviour remains important. The beach is not entirely private. Nothing in this world is. The evening may bring another dinner, another reception, another dance. A summer season can therefore become exhausting in exactly the way a city season is exhausting, only with better air. Newport houses are illuminated late into the night. Music drifts from open windows. Carriage lamps move along dark roads. Servants remain awake long after guests have gone home, clearing glasses, closing shutters, and preparing rooms for the next day. Beyond the houses, the Atlantic beats steadily against rock. That sound offers a kind of stillness the city cannot. For a few moments, perhaps after midnight, the heiress may stand near an open window while curtains move in the salt air. The noise of conversation has faded. The ocean remains. It is one of those rare moments when the scale of her fortune seems almost irrelevant. Country estates provide another version of escape. Families may own large properties in the Hudson Valley, Long Island, the Berkshires, or farther away. There are woods, orchards, fields, stables, gardens, and sometimes working farms whose produce contributes to the household. The rhythms here are older. Morning mist gathers above grass. Hooves sound on gravel. Rain crosses distant fields. The kitchen receives baskets of vegetables. Firewood is stacked. Dogs sleep near steps warmed by afternoon sun. For all the technological sophistication of the Gilded Age, a country estate can still resemble the manor system in small ways. Centuries earlier, a medieval household depended upon fields, livestock, orchards, mills, stored grain, and local labour. Manor courts settled disputes, church bells marked time, and travellers moved along muddy roads between villages. The modern estate is no feudal manor, of course, but it continues the old desire of wealthy families to create a private landscape organised around a central house. There are also remedies and beliefs associated with country life. Fresh air is treated almost as medicine. A family member with weak nerves, poor appetite, headaches, or persistent exhaustion may be encouraged to spend time away from the city. Sea air, mountain air, and countryside rest are prescribed for an astonishing variety of complaints. Doctors sometimes recommend travel with equal confidence. Whether these changes help because of cleaner air, reduced stress, improved diet, simple rest, or the power of expectation is difficult to separate. Still, the custom is deeply rooted. And travel becomes one of the heiress's great privileges. Steamships carry wealthy Americans across the Atlantic in increasing comfort. Cabins may include upholstered furniture, private washing facilities, elaborate dining rooms, and servants assigned to wealthy passengers. The ocean crossing is still unpredictable. Even the finest ship cannot negotiate with rough weather. Trunks slide, china rattles, passengers disappear into cabins with seasickness. Remedies range from sensible rest and fresh air to tonics, smelling salts, ginger, champagne, and various patent medicines. Some travellers swear by one cure, others insist upon another. Those who recorded their experiences never fully agreed on anything except the misery of being seasick. Europe waits beyond the crossing. London, Paris, Rome, Florence, Vienna, and the fashionable spas and resorts of the continent form part of the social geography of the wealthy American family. The heiress visits museums and churches. She sees medieval cathedrals where candles still burn beneath stone vaults. She walks through castles whose walls once enclosed lives very different from her own, though not entirely free from familiar concerns about inheritance, marriage, status, and reputation. In an old European church, she may hear bells rolling across rooftops at dusk. The sound belongs to another century. Pilgrims once followed such bells toward shrines, carrying badges on their cloaks, sleeping at abbeys or roadside inns, eating pottage, bread, smoked fish, and whatever could be found along the journey. The heiress travels with trunks, servants, railway schedules, hotel reservations, and letters of introduction. Yet travel still removes her temporarily from home. That change can be liberating. She's surrounded by family, chaperones, servants, and acquaintances, but unfamiliar streets create a sense of possibility. Languages she once practiced with a governess become useful. Paintings she saw reproduced in books now hang before her. Ancient stone churches seem suddenly real. She may begin to understand that the world is larger than the drawing rooms in which she was trained. At the same time, travel reinforces privilege. Hotels recognize prominent names. Private guides are hired. Railway compartments are reserved. Meals appear on schedule. Luggage seems magically to arrive despite requiring the work of porters, maids, valets, railway staff, ship crews, and hotel servants. Again, leisure is sustained by invisible labour. By late summer, the family begins thinking of return. Trunks are repacked. Rooms are closed. Servants prepare city houses before their owners arrive. The season turns almost imperceptibly. Leaves begin to dull. Evenings grow cooler. The heiress watches landscapes pass beyond a railway window as the household moves once more toward its familiar routines. She has travelled widely. She has crossed water, attended dinners in unfamiliar cities, walked through old churches, and seen estates far grander than her own. Yet the journey has not freed her from the expectations that follow her everywhere. They travel with the trunks. They arrive ahead of her. And when the doors of the city mansion finally open again, society is waiting, rested from summer and ready to begin watching once more, for all the movement, colour, travel, and ceremony surrounding the heiress. There are limits that become more noticeable as adulthood settles around her. Money can open doors. It can make distance easier to cross, illness easier to treat, cold rooms easier to warm, and inconvenience easier to hide. But it cannot guarantee freedom. A married heiress may live in a house larger than the one in which she grew up, employ dozens of servants, own jewels stored behind locked doors, and travel in private railway cars or first-class steamship cabins. Yet the choices most important to her can still be constrained by family expectations, marriage laws, social reputation, and the financial structures created supposedly for her protection. Sometimes that protection feels very much like a cage. If her inheritance has been placed in trust, she may receive a generous income while having little control over the fortune itself. Trustees may determine how money is invested. Family attorneys may oversee property. A father who feared an irresponsible son-in-law might have arranged matters so carefully that his daughter cannot freely use the wealth bearing her name. This can protect her from exploitation. It can also frustrate her deeply. The distinction depends upon who controls the arrangement and whether her wishes are respected. No one can quite agree how often wealthy women experience these trusts primarily as safeguards and how often as restrictions. Surviving correspondence reveals both reactions. Some heiresses valued the independence created by separate property. Others complained that male relatives, bankers, husbands, and lawyers seemed to possess greater authority over their money than they did. Marriage itself can introduce another kind of limitation. A husband may be kind and companionable. He may also be controlling. He may decide where the couple lives, which people they entertain, when they travel, and how publicly his wife participates in charitable or political causes. A woman who was once the treasured daughter of an American industrial family can find herself living far from home, especially if she is married into European aristocracy. The house may be magnificent. The loneliness can be equally large. An English country estate, for example, may contain ancient rooms, galleries lined with portraits, acres of parkland, and stone staircases worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Yet winter settles heavily over such places. Rain crosses bare fields. Fires must be kept burning from morning until night. Long corridors remain cold despite servants carrying coal from room to room. In the distance, as village church bells mark the hours, the sound may remind an American-born woman how far she's travelled from childhood. At such moments, the old house can resemble the medieval world whose remains surround it. Thick oak doors close against drafts. Wool blankets are drawn higher at night. Candles are still useful when storms interfere with newer lighting. In local churches, carved tombs preserve families whose daughters once entered marriages arranged for property, alliance, and lineage. The heiress belongs to a modern age, yet the walls whisper an older lesson. Privilege has never necessarily meant autonomy. Her marriage may also be emotionally disappointing. The courtship that once appeared promising can change once the ceremony is over. A husband may spend long periods away at clubs, business meetings, hunts, gambling tables, or with acquaintances his wife is not expected to question too closely. Double standards are powerful. Behaviour tolerated in husbands can become ruinous when attributed to wives. A married society woman must therefore guard appearances carefully. A friendship with another man may become gossip. An argument overheard by servants may travel. Separate bedrooms can provoke whispers. Too many months spent apart may be noticed by newspapers. The heiress discovers that a mansion offers privacy only from the street. Inside, very little is completely unseen. The maid knows when her mistress has cried. The valet knows when the husband has not returned home. The butler knows which guests arrive unexpectedly. The housekeeper knows which bedrooms are occupied. Servants are expected to remain discreet, and many do, but information can move quietly through any large household. In medieval manor houses, similar networks once flourished beside smoky hearths and soot-dark rafters. A chamber servant might know that a noble marriage was failing long before the wider court suspected it. A stable hand could notice an unexplained journey. A household chaplain might receive private anxieties that would never be spoken at the high table. People change. Houses remain remarkably good at collecting secrets. For the Gilded Age heiress, the safest response is often self-control. She's trained not to make scenes. If unhappy at dinner, she smiles. If irritated by a guest, she remains courteous. If wounded by gossip, she may deny that she's heard it. This discipline can be admired as dignity, but it carries a cost. A life spent managing appearance can make genuine emotion difficult to express. The medical language of the age sometimes transforms this unhappiness into illness. Women suffering from exhaustion, anxiety, sadness, insomnia, headaches, or emotional strain may be described as having weak nerves or neurasthenia. Treatments vary widely. Some physicians recommend travel, sea air, electrical treatments, tonics, massage, or strict rest. The famous rest cure can require a patient to remain in bed for extended periods, separated from ordinary activity and sometimes even discouraged from reading or writing. For an active, intelligent woman, such treatment could feel unbearable. Others find temporary relief in enforced quiet. Even now, historians continue to debate the ways medical diagnoses of the period reflected genuine illness, social expectations, and limited understanding of mental health. Households possess their own remedies as well. Smelling salts might be kept close at hand. Lavender water is used for headaches or agitation. Hot bricks wrapped in cloth-warm cold beds. Mustard plasters appear for chest complaints. Herbal teas, patent tonics, and bottles with reassuring labels accumulate in cabinets. Many treatments provide comfort chiefly because the ritual of care itself is comforting. A servant brings warm water, curtains are drawn, a fire is tended. The room becomes quiet. Outside, rain touches the window glass with steady patience. There are other constraints beyond marriage. Pregnancy and motherhood can narrow a woman's movements for months at a time. Society expects children, especially in families concerned with inheritance. Yet childbirth remains dangerous despite improvements in medicine. A wealthy woman has access to respected physicians and trained nurses, but wealth cannot remove all risk. Afterward, nurses and governesses may care for the children much as they did in the heiress's own childhood. This creates another complicated distance. She may love her children deeply while seeing them according to a schedule shaped by servants, lessons, meals, and social obligations. Some mothers deliberately reject this pattern and spend far more time with their children. Others reproduce the household structure in which they themselves were raised. Patterns of privilege are often inherited as quietly as property. Even her friendships may be confined. Certain women are appropriate companions. Others are considered too theatrical, too political, too divorced, too unconventional, or simply too unfamiliar to the family circle. A wealthy woman can invite almost anyone into her drawing room, but she cannot control what society says afterward. Divorce offers a possible escape from an unhappy marriage, though it carries serious consequences. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, divorce is becoming more visible in American society, especially in certain jurisdictions where laws are more permissive. Still, scandal can be intense. A divorced heiress may be excluded by some acquaintances and welcomed by others. Custody battles can become painful. Property arrangements may be contested. Newspapers can publish details that once belonged only to lawyers and family members. The fear of such exposure keeps some women in unhappy marriages far longer than they might otherwise remain. Others decide that reputation is less valuable than freedom. That decision requires a different kind of courage from the polished bravery expected in a ballroom. It is quieter, more private, and often far more consequential. As evening settles over the estate, the outward signs of wealth remain undisturbed. Servants light lamps, heavy curtains close against the dark. A silver tray waits in the entrance hall, our dinner will appear at the appointed hour. Somewhere beyond the house, wind moves through trees and across winter fields, bending bare branches against a pale sky. From a distance, everything seems secure. Inside, the heiress may sit alone beside a fire, surrounded by objects beautiful enough to fill museums. Yet beauty does not answer every question. A fortune can purchase space without companionship, protection without choice, and comfort without contentment. And gradually, some women born into this world begin searching for ways to make their lives larger than the houses that contain them. They turn outward, toward hospitals, schools, libraries, churches, reform societies, museums, settlement houses, and charitable organizations. If private life offers too little room for meaningful authority, public service can sometimes provide another path. There, the heiress may discover that the same name and fortune that once confined her can also become instruments of influence. When the heiress begins turning outward, the change is not always dramatic. It may start with a committee meeting in a drawing room. A friend calls and asks whether she will lend her name to a hospital fundraiser. A rector's wife wonders if she might help organize a church fair. An older aunt invites her to attend a meeting for a charitable society that provides blankets, soup, coal, or visiting nurses to families living in harder circumstances than any she has known personally. At first, these obligations can seem like extensions of society itself. The same women who appear at dinners and musicals also appear at charity luncheons. The same careful stationery is used. The same carriages pull up before large houses, though now the purpose is said to be useful rather than merely social. And yet, beneath the familiar forms, something important begins to shift. For perhaps the first time, the heiress discovers a sphere in which her name carries power beyond marriageability, decoration, or household grace. She's still expected to dress properly, speak gently, and avoid scandal. But now she may also chair a committee, raise money, inspect a schoolroom, visit a ward, sponsor a library, or help direct a reform effort. It is not political authority in the formal sense. It is quieter than that, but quiet power can still alter the world. Many wealthy women of the Gilded Age move into philanthropy partly because society approves of it. Charity fits accepted ideals of femininity. A woman is supposed to be compassionate, moral, and attentive to suffering. Supporting orphans, hospitals, churches, homes for working girls, relief societies, and educational causes appears both respectable and admirable. At the same time, philanthropy allows women to organize, manage money, shape institutions, and influence public life with a seriousness not always available inside their own households. No one can quite agree whether elite women were motivated more by sincere compassion, social expectation, religious duty, or a desire for meaningful occupation. Because in most cases, the answer is probably all of these at once. Human motives rarely separate themselves into tidy parcels. A church often provides the first path. The heiress may sit on parish committees, arrange flowers for the altar, finance repairs, sponsor a mission, or oversee charity bazaars whose embroidered linens, baked goods, preserves, and hand-sewn items are sold to raise funds. These fairs can be lively affairs, filled with booths, ribbons, and women who have transformed domestic accomplishment into public usefulness. It is an old pattern in a new setting. Centuries earlier, noblewomen and abbesses had also linked piety with practical care. Medieval convents offered food, alms, prayers, hospitality, and sometimes medicine. Monasteries kept herb gardens where rosemary, sage, fennel, rue, lavender, and other plants were grown for remedies and household use. Almoners distributed relief to the poor at the gates. Candles burned before altars while outside. Muddy roads led villagers, pilgrims, and the sick toward whatever help could be found. The Gilded Age heiress does not live in an abbey, yet she sometimes steps into a similar tradition of structured benevolence. Only now the setting may be an urban parish house, a charity office, or a hospital boardroom rather than a stone cloister. Hospitals become especially important. By the late 19th century, hospitals are changing from places of desperation into institutions increasingly associated with scientific medicine, surgery, nursing reform, and public health. Wealthy women often serve on boards, fund new wings, donate beds, provide linens, sponsor training schools for nurses, and organize benefits to raise money for equipment or buildings. A hospital bed may even carry a donor's name. This is not pure vanity, though vanity is never entirely absent from human arrangements. Naming can encourage more giving, and large institutions are expensive to maintain. A woman who has long been excluded from formal business may find herself reading reports, listening to physicians, reviewing expenses, and discussing sanitation, ventilation, or staffing. Such work can sharpen her considerably. Settlement houses introduce another kind of experience. In poorer neighborhoods of large cities, reformers establish centers offering classes, childcare, clubs, lectures, bathing facilities, and practical assistance to immigrant and working families. Some heiresses visit only occasionally, bringing donations and attending public events. Others become deeply engaged and spend real time there, encountering urban poverty more directly than drawing room charity ever allowed. These visits can unsettle comfortable assumptions. The heiress who has spent her life served by immigrant maids, laundresses, cooks, and coachmen may now see the crowded tenements from which such workers often come. She notices dim stairwells, airless rooms, children sharing beds, mothers sewing late into the night, and labouring families whose lives are organised not around social seasons but around rent, wages, illness, and exhaustion. Some women return from such visits stirred toward reform. Others come back mostly confirmed in their own benevolence. Even now, historians continue to debate whether elite philanthropy primarily relieved suffering or reinforced hierarchy by allowing the wealthy to manage the poor without fundamentally changing the systems producing hardship. Again, both things may be true. Women's clubs also widen her world. Literary societies, civic groups, reading circles, historical associations, and reform organizations provide spaces where women discuss books, education, labor laws, sanitation, temperance, child welfare, and eventually suffrage. Not every heiress becomes a reformer. Some prefer cultural patronage to social change. They endow museums, concert halls, libraries, universities, and collections of paintings or manuscripts. Still, even cultural patronage carries influence. A woman who helps create a museum shapes what a city preserves. A donor to a university helps decide which knowledge is honoured. A benefactor funding a library changes who may read. These acts are not always dramatic in the moment. They accumulate quietly, like stones placed one by one into a wall. There are curious customs surrounding charitable work, too. Committee women keep calling books, subscription lists, visiting lists, and boxes of cards tracking donations, contacts, and obligations. Some carry tiny notebooks tucked into handbags or gloves. Others preserve annual reports with almost devotional care. In a few households, old habits of protection follow them into public service: a saint's medal pinned inside a bodice, a lucky coin in a purse, a lavender sachet carried to ward off unpleasant smells during hospital visits, or smelling salts kept near at hand in case a ward proves overwhelming. Such objects sound small, but private rituals often steady people entering difficult rooms. The heiress also discovers that influence passes through conversation. One woman knows a bishop, another knows a newspaper editor, a third is married to a banker who can secure funding. A fourth sits on several boards at once and can move an idea from church to hospital to school within a month. Social networks, once used mainly to fill ballrooms, now become channels for donations, appointments, introductions, and reform campaigns. Her drawing room changes accordingly. It still hosts tea and polite conversation, but mixed among the silver and flowers are discussions of school attendance, nursing shortages, orphan placements, library subscriptions, housing conditions, factory inspections, and relief funds for families affected by strikes or illness. Outside, late afternoon dims toward evening. Rain gathers softly against the windows, and beyond the townhouses the city turns blue with gathering dusk. Lamps are lit one by one. Somewhere a church bell marks the hour. Farther away, in streets the heiress visits only under certain circumstances. Women are carrying home bread, children are being called indoors, and workers are climbing dark staircases towards supper. The distance between these worlds remains enormous. Yet for a few hours each week she moves across it, not perfectly, not without condescension at times, not without the protection of carriage, status, and name. But she does move, and in that movement she begins to experience a life larger than dress fittings, guest lists, and ceremonial dinners. The authority she could not fully claim within law or marriage sometimes becomes possible through committees, boards, and causes that require judgment as well as sympathy. Her voice, once trained chiefly for drawing room charm, is now used to persuade, organize, and sponsor. People listen, perhaps because of her money, perhaps because of her name, perhaps because she has learned, through years of being watched, exactly how to speak in a way others remember, and as her public role expands, so does the danger attached to it, for visibility, even when earned through good works, invites attention of every kind. Praise may follow, so may criticism. And the same society that applauds an heiress for her benevolence can turn sharply curious when whispers begin rising behind respectable curtains. Visibility brings its own kind of danger. The heiress may spend years learning how to enter a room gracefully, how to speak without offending, how to host difficult guests, and how to ensure that no domestic confusion reaches the drawing room. Yet none of this guarantees that society will treat her gently once a rumour begins. The Gilded Age loves respectability. It also loves scandal. Newspapers understand this very well. By the late 19th century, the expanding press has discovered that wealthy families make excellent subjects. Their houses are large, their parties extravagant, their marriages public, and their mistakes unusually satisfying to readers who will never enter their ballrooms. A society column may report who attended a dinner, which family has arrived in Newport, who is travelling to Europe, or which young woman appeared in a particularly admired gown. Most of this seems harmless. Then a sentence changes tone. A husband has been absent from his wife's house for several weeks. A woman has been seen repeatedly with the same gentleman. An engagement has suddenly ended. A family that entertained constantly last season has issued almost no invitations this year. Nothing needs to be stated directly, suggestion is enough. The heiress learns that gossip rarely arrives as a clear accusation. It comes as a pause in conversation, a glance exchanged across a tea table, an invitation that does not come, or the gentle comment that someone has not been seen lately. These signals are understood immediately by those trained to notice them. A woman may discover that something is wrong only when familiar doors begin to close. One hostess has no room at dinner. Another is unexpectedly away on the day she calls. A third continues receiving her, but does so with a coolness almost more painful than open rejection. The machinery of exclusion is quiet. That is what makes it effective. No one needs to announce that a woman is no longer entirely acceptable. People simply stop placing her name where it once appeared. Reputation has always worked through community memory. In medieval villages, a different but recognizable form of social judgment existed. A rumour carried through a market square or after church could cling to a household for years. Manor courts recorded disputes involving insults, adultery, broken promises, unpaid debts, and arguments over land or livestock. A woman accused of improper behaviour might discover that even muddy roads between neighbouring villages were not long enough to outrun a story. The setting is very different now. There are telegrams, telephone, railways, newspapers, and beautifully furnished parlours. But the speed of gossip has only increased. The heiress's servants may hear fragments below stairs before she hears them herself. A visiting maid mentions that another household is talking. A chauffeur overhears something outside a club. A butler notices which acquaintance has stopped calling. Servants are expected not to repeat private information, yet the boundaries between households are porous. Staff change positions. Sisters work in different mansions. Cooks know one another. Maids meet on days off. Information travels through these invisible networks with remarkable efficiency. No one can quite agree how much gossip moved from servants upward and how much moved from society downward, because private rumour rarely leaves a reliable record. But memoirs suggest that both worlds watched each other more closely than etiquette liked to admit. Marriage provides endless material. A husband who drinks heavily may be protected by family silence. Gambling debts can be concealed for a time. Affairs are sometimes ignored so long as they remain discreet. But once discretion fails, the problem changes. The heiress may be less troubled by what happened than by the possibility that everyone now knows. This seems strange until one understands how thoroughly reputation supports her social position. A scandal can affect invitations, marriage prospects for younger relatives, business relationships, and the family's standing within elite circles. Even divorce, increasingly possible in law, remains socially perilous. If the heiress seeks one, newspapers may publish details from the proceedings. Accusations of cruelty, abandonment, adultery, or financial misconduct can become public entertainment. Attorneys therefore try to control information carefully. Families may prefer private settlements. Letters can be destroyed. Servants may be questioned. Travel dates are reconstructed. Hotel registers become significant. What once seemed like the ordinary debris of life suddenly becomes evidence. The heiress begins to understand why older women advised caution in correspondence. A letter feels private when written beneath lamplight. It feels much less private when read aloud in a courtroom. For this reason, some people destroy personal letters after relationships end. Others return them during broken engagements. A few keep them hidden inside locked writing desks, boxes, or secret compartments in furniture. Small keys become important objects. A woman may wear one on a ribbon or keep it among her jewellery. There are also less practical methods of guarding privacy. Some households burn unwanted correspondence directly in bedroom fireplaces. The ritual is simple paper folded once, placed into flame, then watched until names and sentences darken into curling ash. The practice has an older echo. Medieval people sometimes destroyed dangerous documents, charms, or written accusations in fire, believing that burning could end both the physical object and something of its influence. In later centuries, the belief becomes less supernatural but no less emotionally satisfying. A letter reduced to ash feels harder for the world to recover. Not every scandal involves romance. Inheritance quarrels can be equally bitter. A wealthy parent dies, and suddenly brothers, sisters, cousins, trustees, attorneys, and surviving spouses discover that they remember old promises differently. Wills are challenged. Trusts are disputed. Jewellery becomes symbolic. A painting hanging quietly in a hallway for 30 years can provoke a family argument if two people believe it was promised to them. Servants may remember conversations no one thought important at the time. A maid recalls hearing a dying relative express a preference. A secretary knows when a document was drafted. A nurse witnessed the final weeks of illness. The grand household that once seemed built to conceal private life now contains dozens of possible witnesses. Money does not create every family conflict. It simply gives conflict more things to attach itself to. There are also scandals of taste. A woman may entertain someone considered socially unsuitable. She may support a political cause disliked by her relatives. She may appear too frequently in newspapers. She may dress in a way thought too bold. She may become friendly with artists, actors, writers, reformers, or divorced women who exist beyond the safest circles of established society. Sometimes the transgression is tiny. What matters is not the act itself, but the impression that she no longer accepts the rules. The irony is that some heiresses become more independent precisely because scandal has already touched them. Once a woman has been criticized publicly, she may discover that fear loses some of its power. There are limits to what society can take from someone who no longer depends entirely upon its approval. Not every woman reaches that point. Many continue guarding reputation with extraordinary care. They employ discretion as another household skill. Guests are selected cautiously. Servants are trusted selectively. Personal papers remain locked. Unpleasant family matters are handled through lawyers rather than conversations that might be overheard. Even illness can be disguised. A hostess might claim fatigue rather than admit emotional distress. A husband is said to be travelling when the marriage is strained. A daughter is described as resting in the country when she's been removed from a difficult social situation. Language softens reality. This too is a form of protection. Outside. An autumn wind moves through the trees and pushes dry leaves along the pavement. The mansion windows glow against the darkness. Inside, a fire settles lower in the grate, and the last guest has gone home. A calling card remains on the silver tray near the entrance. Upstairs, the heiress sits at her writing desk. There may be a newspaper folded nearby. Perhaps her name is printed in it. Perhaps it is not. Tonight, silence itself feels valuable. The maid has finished arranging the room. Heavy curtains hold back the cold. A little bottle of lavender water stands near the mirror, one of those familiar household comforts recommended for headaches, sleeplessness, or nerves. Whether the fragrance truly cures anything is uncertain, but the scent is gentle, and sometimes gentleness is enough. Beyond the house, the city continues talking. Some stories will fade by morning, others will survive for years. The heiress has spent most of her life learning how to be visible without appearing exposed. Now she understands that the two conditions are difficult to separate. Every fortune attracts interest. Every great house gathers stories. Every family keeps things behind closed doors. And as the years move forward, those doors will begin opening onto a world changing faster than even the most careful hostess can control. The world that formed the heiress does not disappear in a single season. It changes slowly at first. A new motorcar appears outside a neighbour's house. A younger woman arrives at luncheon wearing a skirt cut differently from the fashions of only a few years before. A family once considered socially untouchable begins selling land. Another fortune, built from a newer industry, enters society with such confidence that older families have little choice but to accept it. The heiress notices these changes from within rooms designed to suggest permanence. Portraits remain on the walls. Silver still shines beneath chandeliers. The butler still announces guests. Dinner is still served in courses. Yet the world beyond the curtains has begun moving at a different speed. The automobile is one of the clearest signs. At first it can seem noisy, unreliable, and faintly absurd beside a well-kept carriage. Horses are familiar. A carriage has elegance. Its rituals are understood. Grooms know what to do. Coachmen know the roads. And the gentle clatter of wheels has belonged to wealthy households for generations. Motorcars smell of oil and gasoline. They break down. They frighten horses. Their early drivers wear goggles, gloves, dust coats, and expressions of determination. Still, they become irresistible. A journey that once depended upon fresh horses can be made more freely. Country roads begin filling with automobiles. Families purchase cars for city use and larger touring models for longer trips. Chauffeurs replace some coachmen, creating a new servant role almost overnight. The old stable may gradually lose its central importance. For an heiress accustomed to carefully planned movement, the automobile offers something subtle but significant speed. A visit can be made more quickly. A country estate becomes easier to reach. A woman who learns to drive herself possesses a degree of mobility that would have astonished her grandmother. Not every family approves. Some consider driving unfeminine. Others treat it as merely another fashionable amusement. No one can quite agree how liberating the first automobiles felt to wealthy women, because independence still depended on money, roads, family permission, and social expectations. But the ability to control one's own movement carries symbolic power. The streets themselves begin to change. Horses do not vanish immediately. Carriages and motorcars share roads for years, producing dust, noise, confusion, and occasional alarm. The smell of manure, once one of the unavoidable features of city life, gradually gives way to exhaust and petroleum. Modernity does not necessarily smell better, it simply smells different. Inside the mansion, technology alters quieter routines. Telephones become increasingly ordinary. Messages that once required notes, servants, or calling cards can now be transmitted almost instantly. This creates a new social problem. Etiquette must catch up. How long should a telephone conversation last? Who answers? When is it rude to call? Should a servant first determine who is speaking? Early telephone habits vary, and some households remain suspicious of the device's intimacy. A voice can enter the home without passing through the front door. That is a remarkable disruption in a culture built upon controlled access. Electric lighting spreads as well. The old evening atmosphere changes. Gaslight and candles once required constant tending. Beeswax candles had illuminated great houses for centuries, from medieval abbeys to 18th century palaces, and servants understood the ritual of trimming wicks, carrying tapers, and replacing spent candles. Electricity seems almost magical by comparison. A switch can flood a room with light. There is no flame, no melted wax, no soot above the fixture. Yet people do not always trust it at first. Early electrical systems can be unreliable, and fires caused by faulty wiring are a genuine fear. Some houses maintain candles and oil lamps as backup long after electric fixtures are installed. Old habits rarely vanish as quickly as new inventions arrive. The heiress may still keep a candle beside her bed. Perhaps she prefers its softer glow. Perhaps the maid does. Perhaps no one wishes to depend entirely upon wires hidden behind the walls. Fashion is changing more visibly. The elaborate silhouettes of the late 19th century begin to soften. Skirts gradually become less cumbersome. Hairstyles change. Hats grow large, then later shrink again. By the years surrounding the First World War, clothing moves toward greater practicality. Corsets change shape. Eventually, many women abandon the rigid forms once considered indispensable. The transformation can seem superficial, yet clothes shape movement. A woman who can walk more easily may go farther. A woman who does not require elaborate assistance to dress gains small pieces of independence throughout the day. The heiress watches younger women accept freedom she once approached cautiously. They bicycle. They drive. They attend colleges in greater numbers. They enter professions previously dominated by men. They speak publicly. They organize political meetings. And increasingly, they demand the vote. The campaign for women's suffrage reaches deep into elite society. Some wealthy women oppose it, believing politics incompatible with traditional femininity. Others support it passionately, using their homes, money, and social connections to organize meetings and fund campaigns. A drawing room can become a political space. Tables once covered with calling cards now hold pamphlets. Women who learn to organize charity bazaars discover that the same skills can organize lectures, petitions, and fundraising drives. For some heiresses, this development feels natural. For others, unsettling. Their world has always taught them that influence should be discreet. Suffrage makes influence explicit. The old distinction between private female persuasion and public male authority begins to weaken. Even now, historians continue to debate how much wealthy suffragists helped or complicated the broader movement. Their money and visibility provided resources, but the struggle was never limited to elite women and working-class activists. Black women, immigrant organizers, and reformers brought experiences and priorities that wealthy society did not always understand or welcome. The heiress may not see the full picture. Few people do while living through change. Then war accelerates everything. When Europe enters war in 1914, the social world of transatlantic travel changes abruptly. Families with relatives, estates, or friends overseas receive unsettling letters. Steamship journeys feel more dangerous. News arrives of battles in places previously associated with tourism, art, or old aristocratic connections. When the United States enters the war in 1917, wealthy households are drawn more directly into national mobilization. Charity work intensifies. Women organize relief drives, hospitals, nursing support, clothing collections, and war bond campaigns. Some daughters of society families volunteer with organizations near military camps or travel overseas in auxiliary roles. Luxuries suddenly appear different. Food conservation is encouraged. Households are asked to reduce waste. Gardens become symbols of patriotic usefulness. Certain servants leave for military service or better-paying industrial work. A grand house that once seemed capable of operating unchanged through generations discovers how quickly staffing can become difficult. The war also weakens older social hierarchies. A servant who has worked in a mansion may leave for a factory and never return. Wages rise in some sectors. Domestic service becomes less attractive to younger workers who see alternatives. The great mansion begins losing one of the foundations that made its effortless luxury possible: abundant labour. The heiress may notice empty spaces below stairs before anyone speaks openly about decline. One maid now does work once divided among two. The second footman is not replaced. A wing of the house is closed during winter to save heating costs. Meals become slightly simpler. These changes can seem almost invisible to guests. The mistress notices. Taxes change too. The enormous fortunes accumulated during the Gilded Age encounter a political climate increasingly suspicious of inherited wealth and monopolistic power. Federal income taxation, estate taxation, regulation, and progressive-era reforms begin reshaping the economic world that created the old families. A fortune remains enormous, but its future is less certain. Then comes another transformation. After the war, younger society embraces different rhythms. Jazz, automobiles, cinemas, shorter skirts, cigarettes in public, freer courtship, and new attitudes toward divorce make the formal world of the heiress's youth seem increasingly distant. A daughter or niece may refuse the elaborate rules once considered essential. She may speak to men without a chaperone. She may choose marriage with less concern for family strategy. She may even consider paid work despite having no financial need for it. The older heiress watches this with mixed feelings. Perhaps envy, perhaps relief, perhaps disapproval, perhaps all three. One evening she walks through a drawing room that has changed remarkably little. The furniture is still polished. A familiar portrait remains above the mantel. Rain taps softly against the glass. Somewhere beyond the house, an automobile horn briefly replaces the old sound of carriage wheels. The firelight moves across objects inherited from another age: a silver box, a fan, a faded dance card. A photograph taken when gowns were heavier and society's rules seemed permanent. Nothing stays permanent. That is the quiet truth hidden beneath every mansion. The world that taught the heiress how to stand, dress, marry, entertain, and remain respectable is beginning to loosen around her. The rules have not vanished, but they no longer possess quite the same authority. And as the years continue passing, the grand houses themselves will begin to face the question their owners once rarely imagined. What happens to a world built for permanence when history simply moves on? As the heiress grows older, the mansions of her youth begin to seem less like permanent monuments and more like enormous vessels carrying memories from a vanished age. Some remain occupied, others grow quieter. Rooms once opened for balls are closed for months at a time. Furniture is covered with sheets. Chandeliers hang in darkness. Servants who once moved constantly through back stairways retire or leave, and replacements become harder to find. A house designed for 30 or 40 workers cannot easily adapt to a world in which domestic service is no longer one of the most common forms of employment available to young people. Heating alone can become an enormous expense. Roof repairs are worse. Stonework cracks, pipes corrode, taxes rise, gardens require armies of labourers who no longer come cheaply. The mansion that once proclaimed the permanence of a family fortune slowly reveals itself as an extraordinarily expensive object requiring constant care. For the aging heiress, this decline can feel personal. She remembers rooms not as architectural spaces but as scenes from life. A staircase recalls the evening of her debut. A window brings back the morning she waited for a letter. A guest bedroom once belonged to a beloved aunt during summer visits. The dining room contains echoes of long tables crowded with people whose names have gradually moved from invitation lists into obituary columns. Objects acquire greater importance as people disappear. A silver photograph frame survives a marriage. A fan survives a ballroom. A pearl necklace passes from mother to daughter. A faded dance card remains tucked inside a drawer, its penciled names belonging to young men who once seemed destined to shape the future. There may be bundles of letters tied in ribbon. Some are kept, some are destroyed. Families often treat correspondence carefully, especially when it contains details capable of embarrassing descendants or complicating the respectable version of family history. Diaries can disappear for the same reason. Papers are sorted after deaths, and someone must decide what deserves preservation. No one can quite agree how much of the intimate world of Gilded Age women was lost in this way. Historians work with what survives, but survival is never neutral. Love letters may have been burned, unpleasant memories may have been omitted from memoirs. Family disputes can be softened into silence. A daughter preserving her mother's papers might remove precisely the pages modern readers would most wish to see. The surviving photograph therefore tells only part of the story. The woman in the image sits upright in an embroidered gown, hands composed in her lap, expression controlled. Nothing in the photograph reveals the headache she may have had that morning. Nothing tells us whether she liked her husband. Nothing records the maid standing just beyond the camera or the lawyer waiting downstairs with documents concerning the family trust. The hidden life remains hidden, partly because respectable families were so skilled at concealment. As the 20th century advances, some mansions are sold, others are demolished. A few become schools, embassies, museums, clubs, hotels, or public institutions. Their carved panelling is sometimes removed and sold separately. Fireplaces cross oceans. Entire rooms are dismantled and reconstructed elsewhere. Paintings go to auction. Silver is divided among heirs. Libraries are dispersed. The physical world that once surrounded the heiress begins moving into other hands. This too has an older parallel. Medieval monasteries once seemed permanent until dissolution, war, fire, political upheaval, or simple abandonment emptied them. Great halls lost roofs. Oak doors rotted. Bells disappeared from towers. Illuminated books left abbey libraries and travelled into private collections. Objects outlive institutions in unpredictable ways. A pilgrim badge dropped beside a muddy road can survive centuries. A wooden trencher may disappear within a generation. A gold reliquary survives because someone believes it valuable. The same uneven survival shapes the Gilded Age. A diamond necklace may remain carefully documented while the kitchen ledger, recording the lives of servants, is thrown away. A portrait of the heiress is preserved, while photographs of the women who dressed her vanish into unnamed boxes. History remembers wealth particularly well, because wealth leaves durable things behind. Stone, silver, jewels, legal papers, paintings. But the quieter parts of life require more imagination. The heiress herself may begin simplifying. She no longer needs a new gown for every important season. Evening invitations become less frequent. The social battles that once seemed urgent lose some of their power. Younger relatives inherit the role of being watched. She becomes the older woman at the dinner table, the one who remembers rules others have stopped following. Perhaps she notices a granddaughter entering a room without the elaborate formality once demanded of her. Perhaps no one uses calling cards anymore. The telephone rings directly. Cars wait outside instead of carriages. Women vote. Divorce appears in respectable families without producing quite the same shock. Young couples spend time together without an aunt stationed conveniently nearby. The heiress may regard some changes with relief and others with bewilderment. That is the privilege and difficulty of living long enough to watch one's own customs become history. Even the body imposes a slower rhythm. Stairs that once seemed ceremonial become tiring. Long dinners become less appealing. Travel is reduced. Winter encourages longer evenings beside the fire. She may keep a wool shawl nearby, an ordinary comfort that would have been recognizable to women centuries before her. Hot water bottles warm the bed. A small bottle of smelling salts might still remain in a drawer long after medical fashion has moved elsewhere. Lavender sachets perfume linen closets. continuing a household custom older than the mansion itself. Outside, the estate grows quiet earlier now. Mist settles over lawns. Branches scratch softly against windows. A distant church bell marks another hour. There are fewer footsteps in the corridors. The great house is learning silence. The heiress remembers people who once filled it, her parents, the governess who corrected her French, the maid who knew exactly how tightly she preferred her corset fastened, the young man who sent flowers after a dance, the relatives who argued over marriages and money, the servants whose names she remembers unexpectedly decades after they left. Memory does not arrange them according to rank. That may be one of age's quieter gifts. The butler and the millionaire can occupy neighbouring rooms in recollection. The cook who prepared hundreds of dinners may be remembered more warmly than a fashionable guest whose arrival once caused days of preparation. The hidden architecture of her life becomes clearer only after much of it has disappeared. Wealth had seemed to place her at the centre. In reality, thousands of other lives supported hers. Dressmakers stitched, miners produced coal, railway workers moved trunks, farmers supplied tables, servants carried water, cleaned grates, polished silver, washed linen, fastened dresses, opened doors, drove horses, prepared baths, and stayed awake after midnight so that luxury could appear effortless. The story of an heiress is therefore never only the story of one wealthy woman, it is the story of an entire world arranged around her. And that world, like every world, passes, years become decades, names engraved on invitations become names carved into stone. The mansion may eventually stand empty beneath winter skies, its curtains removed and its ballroom floor covered with dust. Perhaps it survives as a museum, where visitors walk slowly through rooms once forbidden to strangers. A guide points toward the staircase. A velvet rope protects the furniture. Behind glass lies a fan, a photograph, perhaps a tiny calling card. Visitors look at these objects for a few seconds before moving onward. They cannot hear the orchestra, they cannot smell the coal fires, they cannot feel the weight of the gown or the anxiety of standing beneath chandeliers while hundreds of people quietly judge a young woman's future. But something remains, a sense of a life once lived inside all that splendour, and now the details can begin to fade. The servants' bells are silent. The last carriage has gone. The dining room is dark. Beyond the windows, moonlight rests gently across an empty lawn, and the road beyond the gates disappears beneath trees, far away. Another bell sounds. It could almost belong to an older world entirely, to a stone church beside winter fields, to an abbey where candles burn low, to travellers following muddy roads toward shelter before darkness settles. Time connects these worlds more softly than we sometimes realise. The medieval noblewoman beside her hearth, the Gilded Age heiress beside her fireplace, the modern listener beneath a blanket tonight. Different rooms, different centuries, the same evening darkness gathering beyond the glass, and perhaps that is a peaceful place to leave her, not beneath the brightest chandelier, and not surrounded by photographers or society columns, but in a quiet room after the household has settled. The fire has fallen to a red glow. A clock continues its patient rhythm. Old photographs rest inside drawers. Letters sleep beneath ribbons. The names of forgotten guests fade into silence. Outside, the road is empty. The generations that worried about invitations, inheritances, marriages, appearances, and fortunes have all moved onward, as generations always do. The house grows still. The lamps go out one by one. And somewhere beyond those darkened windows, the night continues quietly, carrying the last echoes of a vanished age into memory. So allow that world to drift farther away now. Let the marble halls soften into shadow. Let the footsteps disappear. Let the distant bells become quieter and quieter until there is nothing left to follow. The heiress, the servants, the carriages, the candlelit rooms, the old families and their carefully guarded secrets can remain where they belong tonight, resting gently in the past, and you can rest here too, while the road grows dark, the firelight fades, and history settles peacefully into sleep. Sweet dreams.